Hello everyone, I'm Nizzahon, here with another top 10 for the Aether Hub. This week, Seiben is going to be doing a lore video on Minotaurs, while I'm covering the top 10 Minotaurs in Magic's history. Stories featuring Minotaurs are one of the oldest folktales in human history, with the Minoan civilization, which is actually where we get the Minnow from in Minotaur, by the way, which existed around 5,000 years ago, taking part in various rituals regarding bulls. Stories about them, created by later civilizations like the Greeks, involved the Minotaur, a strange creature that was part man and part bull. Minotaurs just received a new lord and a bunch of new creatures in Amonkhet, and it seems likely we're going to continue to see Minotaurs in Hour of Devastation. 9 Minotaurs were printed in Amonkhet, and that may not sound like much, but there are only 53 before Amonkhet, making 9 a pretty huge increase. Minotaurs have been somewhat supported tribe a few times before, way back in Homelands and more recently in Theros. Unfortunately for Minotaurs though, they are by far the weakest tribe that I've ever looked at in a top 10, and I've done spiders before, you guys, so that's pretty bad. Only 4 Minotaurs in the history of Magic have managed to get a GP or Pro Tour top 8, and as a result, I did things a little bit differently this time around. Usually, cards on my list receive points depending on how many Grand Prix or Pro Tour top 8s they received, with the top 8 worth twice as much as a Grand Prix top 8, and usually all 10 cards on my top 8 lists are all cards that have some points. However, because only 4 Minotaurs in the history of Magic have made Grand Prix or Pro Tour top 8s, only the top 4 cards on this list use this grading scale. For the rest of their cards, I included the Minotaurs based on their visibility within the Magic community, as well as in finishes and events that aren't quite considered premier level, the same way that Grand Prix and Pro Tours are, such as Star City Games tournaments and Magic Online dailies. Now, let's get started with number 10. At number 10, I have a Commander favorite, Zedroo the Great-Hearted. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even realize she was a Minotaur. Generally, Minotaurs are humanoid, bull-like creatures, not goats. I'm sure fans of the really undersupported goat creature type are disappointed that she didn't get to be one of those, but yes, Zedroo is a Minotaur, and a really unique one at that. She was printed originally in the first Commander expansion that Wizards released, meaning that she was one of the very first commanders that they designed specifically for the Commander format, and there isn't really another general like her. You get to build really fun decks with her that run cards with terrible downsides, and then just donate them all to your opponents while you reap the rewards and your opponents suffer from those downsides. Zedroo is one of the most popular commanders there is because of how unique she is, and I can understand why she's so popular. At number 9, I have a Minotaur Lord, the original Minotaur Lord. Well, actually not the original one, there's one way back in Homeland, but this Minotaur Lord is Rage Blood Shaman. I think Rage Blood Shaman is actually a better lord than the new one in Amonkhet. In Theros block, Minotaurs were relatively well supported. Because it's a Greek-based block, it actually makes sense that they would be, right? But never really became a successful tribal strategy. That said, any deck that is built around Minotaurs is doing it wrong if they don't have this guy. Pumping all your guys and giving them trample is pretty good. This guy even saw a bit of play away from the kitchen table, managing to finish in the top 3 in multiple Theros block events on Magic Online, primarily in red deck wins and Naya aggro decks that happen to be running a few other Minotaurs that made this list. At number 8, I have Boros Battleshaper, who has a very interesting and unique ability. Also, fun fact, an artist with the actual last name Boros illustrated this card. But anyway, back to the card. Boros Battleshaper may have had a high mana cost, but it had a very powerful ability, especially in Return to Ravnica Limited. The ability to force something to attack and something else to be pacifismed every combat is very powerful. He's also not completely devoid of tournament success either, appearing as a reanimation target in Reanimator decks back in Return to Ravnica Standard, because obviously actually hardcasting this guy wasn't really an option in Constructed. The best finish it ever put up was at the Star City Games Open Series in Philadelphia in 2013, where a deck playing the Battleshaper came in 3rd in a field of 467 players. At number 7, I have Oracle of Bones. This card has one of the more unique uses of the tribute mechanic. With most of the other creatures with tribute, you kind of knew what would happen if you didn't pay it. With the Oracle, this wasn't so clear. Sometimes people could play it with no instant or sorcery in their hand at all, and the opponent still lets it be a 5/3 out of fear for what might happen. I like this card a lot because I think it's such a neat design, but it also makes this list because it did have some success at high-level tournaments in the standard of its day. It managed 2 top 8s, one at a Star City Games Invitational Qualifier in Orlando, and another at a Deck Tutor-sponsored tournament in Bologna. Oracle of Bones is interesting because it can fit well into both aggressive and controlling decks thanks to its strange tribute ability. One of these top 8s was in Boros Aggro and the other in Jeskai Control. At number 6, we have Minotaur Skull Cleaver, and one look at this guy and you know what he's about. Cleaving skulls. This guy was a quality common in Theros Limited, and his hyper-aggressiveness was even solid enough for him to see a surprising amount of play in Boros and Mono-Red aggro decks in Theros block Constructed, and the standard of his time. It actually managed to top 10 different daily events in those formats. At number 5, I have Gnarled Scar. Basically, anytime there is a 1-mana 2/1 in a color with other aggressive creatures, it's gonna see play. Gnarled Scar came with the additional upside of the bestow mechanic, which meant in the late game he could be an aura, and he was actually kind of a flexible one. You could use it to pump one of your attackers, or to keep your opponent from blocking so you could get in for lethal damage. This guy was powerful enough that he actually saw a ton of play and was even played at the Pro Tour level in both block and standard, but he didn't get a top 8. He put up a ton of top 8s on Magic Online and dailies, though, predominantly in mono-black aggro decks, 23 of them in block and 20 of them in standard. This guy just missed out on being awarded actual points on this list, and because of that I have him at number 5, right behind the 4 Minotaurs in Magic's history that have actually seen some Pro Tour and Grand Prix success. Let's move on to number 4. At number 4, I have Talroom Minotaur. Kind of the forerunner to Minotaur Skullcleaver, Talroom Minotaur was actually very aggressive for its time. At the time, 4 mana for a 3/3 was pretty normal. When you added more to them, they got to be pretty good, and that's what we have with Talroom Minotaur, who also has haste, and was good enough in Mirage Block Constructed that he picked up 2 Pro Tour top 8s in the format, both in aggro decks. These days, a 4 mana 3/3 with haste and nothing else wouldn't even get close to a top 8, so this is a pretty good illustration of how much power creep there has been with creatures. At number 3, I have Fanatic of Mogis, who was prominently featured in aggressive red decks of his time, alongside Minotaur Skullcleaver and Rageblood Shaman, but unlike them, it also managed to get some Grand Prix top 8s in aggressive decks pushing the Devotion mechanic, 3 in Devotion to Boros and 1 in Devotion to Gruul. These decks were built to just curve out and do a bunch of damage quickly, and a problem aggro decks sometimes have is doing those last few points of damage if their opponent stabilizes. Fanatic of Mogis provided an excellent way to do that, and he ended a lot of games in the format. At number 2, we have Deadshot Minotaur. He went unplayed in the block and standard of its time, and in older formats too, until Travis Wu debuted his Living End deck at an extended Grand Prix in 2010. The deck ran a bunch of creatures with cycling, and then cheated Living End into being cast with the Cascade mechanic, and planned on blowing up the opponent's board, and then returning all of the creatures with cycling that were now in your graveyard to the battlefield. It was a powerful strategy, and while extended ended in 2011, the deck transitioned into Modern 2, and it continues to be a force there, with Deadshot Minotaur continuing to be played. His Enter the Battlefield ability is actually sometimes relevant out of the graveyard too, because it can deal with any of your opponent's flyers that happen to be in their graveyard. Deadshot Minotaur managed to get a top 8 as recently as just 2 months ago in February of 2017, so he probably isn't done yet either. At number 1, completely destroying any of the other Minotaurs on this list, is Boros Reckoner. The Reckoner is an insane Magic card. Being a 3 mana 3/3 who can give himself first strike is nice, but what makes him really stupid is that anytime he's dealt damage, he deals that much damage to a creature or player of your choice. He really makes our number 4 card, Talroom Minotaur, look bad, since they're both 3/3s with extra abilities, and the Boros Reckoners are way better, and he still costs 1 less. One of the most powerful cards in all of Return to Ravnica block, he managed to pick up 3 top 8s at Pro Tour Dragon's Maze, a block Pro Tour, in 2013. He was so good that basically any deck that could cast him played him, both control decks and aggro decks wanted him. He wasn't only held to block though, he also picked up 4 top 8s at Pro Tour Gatecrash, a standard Pro Tour. Once Theros block came out, the fact that Boros Reckoner added 3 to your Devotion to Red was very relevant, and Devotion to Boros and Devotion to Gruul decks began running him, in addition to your more typical aggro decks. Basically, Boros Reckoner was the kind of powerful card that saw play the entire time it was in standard, with rotation not really affecting him at all, until of course he rotated. Since he hasn't seen play anywhere else, but Boros Reckoner is often remembered as a powerful force in standard, and I think it goes without question that this is the best Minotaur in the history of Magic, at least as far as competitive play is concerned. That does it for this top 10. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button. In the comments, give me and Seiben suggestions for future top 10 and lore videos. If you want to catch more top 10s along with great content from the other creators here on the Aether Hub, don't forget to subscribe. You can also find more top 10s like this one over on my channel, NizzahonMagic. Thanks for watching.